Most campfire scary stories are universal. Legend has it that in these very woods, a man with a hook for a hand hides out and waits for little kiddies to fall asleep in their tents so he can murder them. Or the boogeyman who hides in every little kid's closet all over the world. Or the slender man who lives in the generic woods. But some monsters are site-specific. Maybe it has something to do with a decrepit, abandoned institution for the criminally insane, or Old Man McGinty's rundown shack, or that creepy ancient cemetery with the names rubbed out on the headstones from age and wear. But even those stories all end up being roughly the same wherever you go. The former inmates still haunt those halls, and woe be unto any poor soul who wanders too near. Or if you walk too close to Old Man McGinty's shack, he'll grab you and lock you in the basement and turn you into a science experiment. And, of course, there's ghosts in that cemetery. And then there are those legends that are local to only one area. Usually it's very local, like one county or one lake. But some claim one lone state or even one lone country as their territory. According to Atlas Obscura, there are about 20 site-specific cryptids in the United States. That is, cryptids who only hang out in one region, as opposed to something like Bigfoot, who calls many places home. Ohio holds the record for the most of these creatures, at a whopping 3. But unlike the Frogman, who frankly just looks like a huge version of Toad from Frog and Toad, which, sure, I suppose that would be pretty frightening if you came upon it on the road in the middle of the night, but after the initial shock, you'd probably just want to go for a walk in the woods and make cookies and have tea by the fire with it. Or the Grassman, which is Ohio's answer to Bigfoot and is known to eat dogs and other small animals, but not, as far as I can tell, grass. No, unlike those two wild and crazy cryptids, it's Ohio's melon heads that will kill people who get too close. In the woods of Kirtland, Ohio, there is said to be a pack of feral children with misshapen heads who feed on babies. On a piece for 3 News, WKYC in Ohio from October 30th of 2020, newsperson Rachel Polanski, who was probably like, I got a degree in journalism for this, tells us that there are 2 versions of the story of how the so-called melon heads made it to the woods of Kirtland. In the first version, they were orphans taken in by a nefarious man named Dr. Crow who did experiments on them. The children got fed up with being lab rats and killed Dr. Crow and his wife and then burned down the house. And then they were like, where do we go now? Realizing, I imagine, that they shouldn't have burned the one place they had to live down to the ground. The children took to the woods, where over time, they became wild. A second version of the story tells us the children were victims of experiments done by the government. For some reason, at some point, the government was done with them, and like Governor George Abbott does with people he doesn't want to have to deal with, I guess just put them on a bus and shipped them somewhere else. And that's how they ended up at Dr. Crow's house. I don't know why or how this guy was tasked with guardianship, but you know, if we got hung up on every detail and tried to be logical all the time, we never would have gotten cinematic gems like Sharknado. Or Human Centipede, if you prefer sticking with the Mad Doctor in the Woods theme. Sometimes you just have to roll with the absurdity of it all. Anyway, in this version, Dr. Crow was kind and giving and his house still burned down, but the children didn't do it. And as with the first tale, the children were left with nowhere to go, and so they roamed the woods, where, as Amy Capostasi of Lake County Historical Society tells us, they could be dangerous if they wanted to be. Girl, same. Catch me on an off day and you will come out a changed person. Like on a day where I'm out of bed, forget it. Do yourself a favor and just stay away. Now, as far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be a record of any actual person named Dr. Crow that has ever lived in the area, though. Either mad or benevolent. Also, Ms. Capostasi doesn't elaborate on the kind of danger these creatures pose, though I would assume it's a get-out-of-my-territory type situation. You don't hear stories of kids getting snatched from their beds or their backyards by melon heads. And there isn't much info about what these guys eat, other than, I suppose, the rumor of babies. But considering they're forest dwellers, I'd have to guess that their diet is mostly roots and tubers, mushrooms, and maybe small rodents. It's just generally not often you find a huge supply of babies loose in the woods, so suffice to say, this variety of melonhead doesn't seem as dangerous as some of the others. Interestingly, this regional monster story seems to have migrated to at least 2 other states. Over 500 miles away, in and around southwest Connecticut, the melonheads have taken up residency in quite a few areas, including Litchfield, Fairfield, and New Haven counties. According to historian and folklorist Joseph S. Citro in his 2005 book Weird New England, in Fairfield, the melonheads came from, quote, an asylum for the criminally insane, end quote, that burned down in the fall of 1960. The 10 to 20 survivors of the fire likely disappeared into the surrounding woods and resorted to cannibalism in order to survive. Their swollen, misshapen heads are the result of the cannibalism, you see. In fact, this version of the story claims that the melonheads developed a neurological disorder called hydrocephalus from their cannibalism, which, don't worry, we'll get back to that in a minute. Another version of the melonheads of Connecticut is explained on the now-defunct website Coos Top 5. Quote, as a kid, there was a legend where I grew up, southwestern Connecticut, about creatures that prowled Dracula Drive called melonheads for their enormous heads, duh. They were said to be the result of centuries of inbreeding of a family accused of witchcraft in colonial times and forced into the wilderness. The melonheads allegedly prey on humans who wander into their territory. In reality, Dracula Drive's name is Velvet Street, and you drive there on a date, tell the melonhead story on the way, stop the car, turn out the lights, knock on your own window and pretend to be scared, and hopefully scare the pants off your date, literally. It never worked, and never ever did actual melonheads appear, end quote. The accompanying drawing of the melonhead on this post features a tall, skinny figure with a slightly enlarged head, and also a long black bar from its pelvis downward, presumably covering up the impressively large penis this melonhead had. I guess the guy's lucky this melonhead didn't show up when he tried to scare his date into taking her pants off. One look at that schlong and she would have been like, "See ya, Bob," and traipsed off into the woods, probably never to be seen again. Maybe that's how they lured their food. According to Weird New England, there were indeed several institutions around the Fairfield area, all in rather remote spots surrounded by woods, that probably led to the creation of these stories. As it's stated on the Wikipedia page, quote, Central Fairfield County is home to the now-defunct Fairfield Hills State Mental Hospital, as well as the Garner Correctional Institution, both located in Newtown. The care and treatment for adult male offenders with significant mental health issues throughout the Connecticut Department of Correction were consolidated at Garner Correctional Institution. Also, there is the Federal Correctional Institution located in nearby Danbury. This part of Fairfield County has historically been a rural area filled with farms and forests. The proximity of several criminal and psychiatric institutions, as well as their juxtaposition to rural areas of the county, may have contributed elements to the legend of the melonheads, end quote. Another feature of the Connecticut melonheads is that they will bite and/or consume anyone who happens to wander into their territory. And one supposes if they eat each other, they'll probably eat you. And your little dog, too! And if we travel west almost 800 miles from Fairfield, Connecticut, or about 300 miles from their home in Kirtland, Ohio, we meet the Michigan branch of the Melonheads family, who also have several versions of their origin story. The Michigan Melonheads are generally said to live in the woods around Felt Mansion. Their story goes, originally inmates at a psychiatric institution referred to as the Junction Insane Asylum, these children, who were said to have hydrocephalus, became feral as a result of the emotional and physical abuse they suffered at the asylum, eventually becoming out of control and released into the surrounding wilderness by staff who were like, fuck this shit. This story would be unbelievable if we didn't know that a version of this happened all over the United States in the 1980s when Reagan shut down the psychiatric hospitals without a plan as to where to put all the people who lived in them. They, like Governor Abbott's victims, were put on buses to become someone else's responsibility. Apparently, there's no evidence of a Junction Insane Asylum having ever existed, but interestingly, after the original family that built Felt Mansion moved away, it became a seminary for boys. Because it was a private school, according to a man who'd gone there as a child, the local public school kids assumed the boys at the seminary were smart and gave them the derisive nickname Melon Heads. After the seminary, the Felt Mansion became part of a men's prison. It's likely the combination of the name Melon Heads already floating around the area, coupled with a men's correctional facility made for just the setting for the Melon Heads legend to take hold. One version of the Michigan legend says that the children who lived in Felt Mansion had, for some reason, escaped into underground caverns and tunnels where, apparently, they live to this day. It's said that the children devised a plan to escape and kill the doctor that abused them. Another version says the children in this mansion, like those in Ohio and Connecticut, were being experimented on by an evil doctor whom they finally killed. The children, having no place to hide the body, cut it up into small pieces, which they hid around the mansion. Intrepid teenagers who have ventured, or really broken, into the site are rumored to have seen the ghosts of the children roaming the empty halls of Felt Mansion, and say you can see the murder play out in a kind of shadow play on the walls. The 2011 movie Melon Heads is based on the Michigan legend, apparently. I haven't watched it because I have self-respect. And there's another Melon Heads movie apparently in the works right now. Listen, God bless people who make their own movies. Honestly, I wish I could. It's incredibly hard, and that deserves kudos. But it's also incredibly expensive to make a movie anyone would really want to watch. So, anyway, regardless of how the Melon Heads in each legend wound up with the deformed heads, almost 100% of the stories include the fact that they have hydrocephalus. In some versions, they arrived in the woods or at Dr. Crow's home like that. In others, he gave them the condition through his evil experiments, and in at least one, the cannibalism did it. Hydrocephalus is a condition that usually affects babies and the elderly. It literally means water on the brain, and it happens when there's a blockage in the brain that doesn't allow fluids to move naturally in and around the brain. In babies, it can cause a marked swelling of the skull. If an older child, or an adult for that matter, develops it, their skulls don't swell because once the skull bones are fused together, that's the end of that. So the idea that children who developed typically would suddenly grow enlarged heads, whatever the reason, is just silly. Unless, I suppose, evil Dr. Crow was, removing portions of their skulls to allow their brains to swell. And I'm sure I don't have to point out that one doesn't get hydrocephalus from cannibalism. The 3 News piece from 2020 includes x-rays and pictures of deformed skulls as part of this fun, spooky season story. But when you think about what they're actually talking about and how those children ended up with the enlarged skulls, the story becomes a lot less fun and a lot more tragic, and, frankly, tasteless. I'm all for monster stories. I like a good jump scare as much as the next guy, but for the love of Anita Baker, have stories like the Salem witch trials, the Elephant Man, Mask, and even Dr. Frankenstein's monster taught us nothing? Maybe back when people were generally ignorant of scientific facts, it was okay to be like, ew, look at this thing that we don't understand. It must be evil. But this is 2024, people. We believe in things like science these days. Well, some of us do, anyway. When my son was very young, the first time he saw a little person, he thought they were a monster. Obviously, we explained and corrected him right away. And to be fair, for some completely unknown reason, whenever he saw an Orthodox Jewish man, he would say, "Dad jeans." So please don't take offense. Children are dummies. And human beings of any age have evolved to distrust or be scared of things that look different from what they're used to. Over the centuries, that distrust helped keep us alive. It makes it so that when we come across a saber-toothed tiger for the first time, our instinct is to be cautious rather than to run up to it saying, "Nice kitty," so as not to end up as saber-toothed tiger scat. But of course, once we've deduced that whatever this new thing is we're looking at isn't a threat, we come to learn that people, no matter how they look, at the end of the day, are just people. Our children learn to stop being monster dummies themselves, hopefully, and eventually society as a whole evolves to a point where those outdated campfire stories and urban legends based on people we were scared of for one reason or another back when we didn't understand them are now just horror stories about our own ignorance. This episode was produced by Natalie Grillo and Angela Palladino. It was researched and written by me, Daisy Egan, and sound engineered and mixed by Angela Palladino. My sources for this episode were ctparanormalsearchers.weebly.com, coostop5.blogspot.com, grandhaventribune.com, clickondetroit.com, 3 News WKYC, and the National Institute for Health website. See you next time.